At 65, Colin Firth finally said something that surprised even his most devoted fans. For years, the world believed they knew the man behind the quiet smile. He was Mr. Darcy, the Oscar-winning actor, the gentleman who rarely spoke about his private life and seemed untouched by Hollywood's endless drama. But the image millions admired was only part of the story. Behind the success was a man who spent much of his life putting others first. Time and again, he chose loyalty over pride, silence over confrontation, and love over his own happiness. Those choices brought him unforgettable moments of joy, but they also led to heartbreak he rarely allowed the world to see. When Colin recently reflected on what love had truly meant to him, many assumed he would speak about the women who shaped his life. Instead, his words pointed to something far deeper than a single relationship. They revealed a lesson that had taken decades to understand. How did one of Britain's most respected actors reach that conclusion? What happened behind the fame, the awards, and the carefully guarded public image that changed the way he viewed love forever? To answer those questions, we have to return to where it all began long before the spotlight, when Colin Firth was simply a quiet young man searching for his place in the world. For much of his life, Colin Firth never looked like a man searching for attention. Even before the awards, the magazine covers, and the characters that made him a household name, there was something reserved about him. While many actors seemed eager to be noticed, Colin often appeared more comfortable standing just outside the spotlight, quietly observing the world around him. That instinct could be traced back to his childhood. Born in Hampshire, England, Colin grew up in a family where learning was deeply valued. His father taught history, while his mother specialized in comparative religion. Their home was filled with books, ideas, and thoughtful discussions that often stretched late into the evening. Curiosity was encouraged, but emotions were rarely displayed with dramatic flair. Problems were examined carefully, not shouted across the room. Opinions were debated with patience rather than anger. For a naturally quiet boy, that environment left a lasting impression. Instead of becoming outspoken, Colin became observant. He learned to notice the smallest changes in people's expressions, the pauses between sentences, and the emotions hidden beneath ordinary conversations. Long before he stepped onto a stage, he had already become a careful student of human nature. It was a skill that would later define his acting. As a teenager, however, he wasn't certain that acting would become his future. Like many young people, he wrestled with uncertainty and wondered where he truly belonged. It wasn't fame that attracted him to the theater. It was the opportunity to explore emotions that were often left unspoken in everyday life. On stage, silence could carry as much meaning as dialogue. A glance could reveal more than an entire page of words. For Colin, acting became less about pretending to be someone else and more about understanding people. Years of training followed. Success did not arrive overnight. There were auditions that led nowhere, supporting roles that attracted little attention, and moments when a more secure career might have seemed tempting. Yet those who worked with him noticed qualities that couldn't easily be taught. He possessed remarkable patience, careful discipline, and an ability to communicate vulnerability without asking for sympathy. Those qualities slowly opened doors. By the late 1980s, Colin was steadily building a reputation as a talented young British actor. He was respected by directors and admired by fellow performers, but he remained far from international stardom. At that stage, the future could have unfolded in countless different ways. Then came a film that changed far more than his career. While working on Valmont, Colin met actress Meg Tilly. Their connection wasn't built on glamour or celebrity. Away from the cameras, they found themselves talking about ordinary things: family, books, the challenges of balancing work with real life. Friends would later describe their relationship as refreshingly uncomplicated, grounded in genuine affection rather than Hollywood expectations. For Colin, Meg represented something different from the fast-moving entertainment industry. She already had a full life of her own, including children from a previous marriage and a career that had earned critical recognition. She didn't appear interested in chasing fame for its own sake, and perhaps that was part of what drew Colin toward her. Around her, he didn't have to perform. he could simply be himself. As their relationship grew, Colin made a decision that surprised many people around him. Instead of concentrating entirely on advancing his career, he chose to spend much of his time in Canada, where Meg had built a quieter life. It was a dramatic contrast to the film sets, interviews, and professional opportunities waiting in Britain. Friends wondered whether such a move might slow the momentum of an actor whose career was only beginning to gain traction. Colin seemed untroubled by those concerns. For him, success had never been measured solely by awards or leading roles. He appeared to believe that a meaningful life was built through everyday moments, the kind that rarely appeared on magazine covers. Sharing meals, helping raise a family, enjoying peaceful evenings far from the demands of celebrity, those experiences mattered just as much as professional ambition. Looking back, it's easy to assume those years represented a pause in his career. In reality, they revealed something much deeper about the man he was becoming. Again and again, Colin showed a willingness to place relationships ahead of recognition. He wasn't driven by the need to prove himself to the world. Instead, he often seemed more concerned with protecting the people closest to him, even if that meant placing his own ambitions second. It was a quality many admired. It was also a quality that would eventually test him in ways he could never have imagined. No relationship, however loving, remains untouched by time. Careers evolve, priorities shift, new opportunities appear, sometimes asking impossible questions. As Colin's professional future began calling him back to England, both he and Meg found themselves standing at a crossroads that offered no easy answers. The decisions made during that period would shape the next chapter of his life in ways neither of them could fully foresee. Within a few short years, Colin Firth would become one of Britain's most recognizable actors almost overnight. The world would celebrate the elegance, confidence, and quiet strength he brought to the screen. Millions would believe they understood exactly who he was. But behind the growing fame was a man still carrying the habits he had developed long before anyone knew his name. A man who found it easier to give than to ask, easier to listen than to speak, and easier to protect someone else than to protect himself. Those qualities helped create the public image audiences admired. They also set the stage for the greatest challenge of his personal life. One that would begin when he believed he had finally found the partner with whom he could build the future he had always imagined. Everything changed faster than Colin Firth could have imagined. Within a remarkably short time, he went from being a respected British actor to an international star. His unforgettable performance as Mr. Darcy introduced him to millions of viewers, and suddenly his quiet life was replaced by interviews, premieres, and constant public attention. Yet despite the fame, those closest to him often described the same thoughtful, reserved man they had always known. Success had never been the destination. For Colin, acting was still about telling honest stories rather than becoming a celebrity. While Hollywood celebrated his growing popularity, he searched for something much simpler away from the cameras, a stable family life. That hope seemed to arrive when he met Italian filmmaker and producer Livia Giugioli. Their relationship developed naturally, built on shared interests rather than the excitement of fame. They married, raised 2 sons, and created a life that stretched between England and Italy. Friends admired how carefully they protected their family from unnecessary publicity. Unlike many celebrity couples, they rarely invited cameras into their private world. For years, it appeared they had discovered the balance that so many others struggled to find. Meanwhile, Colin's career continued reaching new heights. Films such as The King's Speech earned widespread acclaim and eventually brought him the Academy Award for Best Actor. It was a moment many performers spend an entire lifetime chasing. Yet behind every professional triumph came new responsibilities. Long filming schedules, international travel, and constant media attention placed pressures on everyday family life. Like countless couples, they faced challenges that could never be captured in a magazine headline. They chose to work through those difficulties privately, believing that some conversations belonged only within the walls of a home. But even the strongest relationships can change over time. As the years passed, reports emerged that Colin and Livia had experienced a period of separation while trying to understand what the future held for their marriage. Rather than responding to endless speculation, Colin remained characteristically quiet. He refused to turn personal pain into public entertainment, even as newspapers searched for dramatic stories. That silence spoke volumes about the kind of man he had always been. He had spent most of his life believing that dignity was stronger than anger, and that not every wound needed an audience. Whether people agreed with his choices or not, he remained consistent with the values that had guided him since childhood. Eventually, the marriage came to an end. For many observers, it became another celebrity headline destined to disappear within a few news cycles. For Colin, it marked the closing of more than 2 decades of shared memories. Anyone who has built a family understands that the end of a marriage is rarely defined by a single moment. It is the quiet realization that life has changed forever, even if the outside world continues moving as though nothing happened. Instead of withdrawing from his profession, Colin poured his energy into meaningful work. The characters he chose became increasingly thoughtful, exploring grief, loyalty, forgiveness, and resilience. Audiences noticed a deeper emotional honesty in his performances, as though experience had given him access to feelings that could never be learned inside an acting classroom. Perhaps that is what time does to every artist. It doesn't simply make them older, it gives them new stories to tell. Looking back across Colin Firth's life, one pattern becomes impossible to ignore. At every turning point, he placed enormous value on the people he loved. Sometimes those choices brought happiness. Sometimes they brought disappointment. Yet none of them erased his belief that love was still worth the risk. Over the years, he also seemed to discover something equally important. Loving another person should never require losing yourself. The young man who once believed that sacrifice alone could protect every relationship gradually came to understand that lasting love depends on honesty, mutual respect, and the courage to remain true to who you are. That lesson wasn't learned overnight. It arrived slowly, through success and failure, celebration and heartbreak, beginnings and endings. Today, Colin Firth's legacy extends far beyond the characters that made him famous. Audiences remember the elegance of Mr. Darcy and the courage of King George VI. But those who look a little deeper often find something even more inspiring. A man who continued growing long after achieving everything the entertainment industry could offer. His greatest achievement may never be measured by awards or box office numbers. It may simply be the quiet strength to keep moving forward, carrying both joy and disappointment with equal grace. And perhaps that is why his story still resonates. Not because it is perfect, but because it reminds us that even those we admire most are still learning, still changing, and still searching for the same thing that connects us all, a life built not only on success, but on love, wisdom, and the courage to begin again. Perhaps Colin Firth's greatest role was never one he played on screen. It was the life he built beyond the cameras, filled with triumphs, painful lessons, and the courage to keep moving forward even when the ending wasn't the one he had imagined. His journey reminds us that real love isn't measured by perfection or by how long a relationship lasts. It's measured by what we learn, how we grow, and whether we find the strength to remain true to ourselves. What do you think was the defining moment in Colin Firth's life? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you